Welcome to the Intersection Podcast on the Midas Touch Network. I'm Michael Popok. Well, let's get right to it. I want to cover Trump missing in action and triggering the 25th Amendment by shoving his corpulent body into a catering container. Then I want to talk about the new amended filing in the case against Todd Blanche, the Department of Justice, related to his grant of tax evasion immunity. Yes, tax evasion immunity for everybody. Well, no, just Donald Trump and his 400 companies and all of his family. And now the IRS auditors have decided they don't want to do illegal things like not auditing Trump and any president as required by law. And they have joined a new lawsuit to have a federal judge declare that Todd Blanche can't give a pass or carte blanche to the Trump family from not paying their taxes. Then there's a development in the BBC case, Donald Trump's case against the BBC, and I don't think he's going to like it. There's a footnote kind of buried at the bottom of Judge Altman's new ruling granting Donald Trump the right to amend his lawsuit. But I don't think it fixes the problem for Donald Trump, who doesn't want to turn over his finances or his tax returns. We've got a new way to get out from under, in this case, a $4 billion worth of securities fraud. You just stroke Donald Trump's ego in a social media post, and then you offer to invest $10 billion in America. And then you meet with Don Jr. and then you hire Donald Trump's private personal lawyer, and poof, your indictment goes away and your Securities and Exchange Commission charges, civil charges, go away. And that's just what happened to Gavlam Adani, a Indian businessman who was staring down the barrel of a very substantial securities fraud case and investment fraud case in the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn, and poof, it disappeared. We'll talk about how federal judge in the case decided he wanted to let the Department of Justice know that things were not acceptable to him, and that they did underhanded things that the court wants the public to know about. And we'll cover that and so much more here on the Intersection Podcast. Hope everybody's doing great as we wrap up summer. Thank you for your fervent support and your generosity about the Intersection. So many different ways to support what we do here. You're already doing it here on the Midas Touch Network. But take a minute and hit the free subscribe button on the Legal AF YouTube channel, where I do most of my work during the day and during the week. And now let's get down to the first segment for the podcast, which is Trump missing in action for a long period of time, which would have triggered the 25th Amendment. Who was in charge exactly? Who was in charge when Donald Trump had his fat backside shoved into that catering container? You probably already know the story, but let me give you a brief synopsis. On July 8th, we saw some weird shell game going on with Donald Trump and his two Air Force Ones. You know, the one that can actually protect him from a missile directed at him from Iran and other countries, and the one that can't. The giant baby blue one, which we associate with Air Force One, and the red, white, and blue one from the Qatari folks, which doesn't have missile defense systems on it. And we were like, well, now he's taking the old Air Force One, and the reporting was because there was an Iranian assassination threat. We're like, oh, well, he better be on the old Air Force One then. And then he sent the new Air Force One off to an American airbase in the UK. It was all weird, you know? And Donald Trump went after some New York Times reporters to try to figure out how we knew that the new plane didn't have missile defense systems and all the reporting they did about the shell game. What we didn't know until the last 24 hours is that it was, I don't know, it was like somebody watched Ocean's 11 and decided to do the exact same thing, but use Donald Trump. You know, the one where that guy that's on the team with with Danny Ocean has to climb into like an ice cream, an umbrella ice cream cart. Yeah, it's sort of like what I thought of when I thought about Donald Trump. So apparently on the July the 8th, they decided to use members of the press and White House staff as human shields. Load them onto the plane. Load Donald Trump onto the plane. except for the for the staff, they were the targets now for the Iranians, human beings, without their permission, unwitting. Out the back of Air Force One, it's got, sort of two doors, where catering usually loads in on a plane. They raised by a hydraulic system a catering container, and Donald Trump went inside and then got carted away into a catering truck, drove across the tarmac to a waiting, smaller Air Force transport jet, where Pete Hegseth later joined him. And then for many hours, his staff believed that he was on Air Force One. Here's my question. God forbid something happened in the moment he was stuffed into this catering container, or making his transit, or on that plane. Who is in charge? Who is in charge of the United States? Who had their finger on the nuclear football? Who was in control of the command and control structure? Who was in the situation room? Couldn't have been Donald Trump, because God forbid the Russians, the North Koreans, the Iranians, the fill in the blank for our adversaries decided at that particular moment, because they got intel of what was going on. All you needed is, the Washington Post has it. All you needed was somebody who was standing behind the plane to figure out what was going on. And suppose at that very moment, they launched a strike, a preemptive strike on America. Who is in charge? It's a good question. It's a question that the Senate and House should put to Donald Trump and anybody that appears in front of them. Under the 25th Amendment, wasn't that triggered? Was J.D. Vance sworn in? We don't know. We should know. Public deserves to know. Was no one sworn in, and therefore nobody was in charge at that critical moment? Only takes a second. George W. Bush was reading a preschool book when the first planes hit the World Trade Center on 9/11. It happened in a blink of an eye. So who was in charge? There's a succession plan under the 25th Amendment. Vice President second, Speaker of the House, Secretary of State, halfway down. Defense Secretary, more than halfway down. Who is in charge? And why doesn't that matter to people in his administration? Because if nobody was sworn in, like J.D. Vance, they're going to tell me, look the American people in the eye and say, we're not at risk at that moment. There's one way of looking at it. Thank God Donald Trump was missing in action for a number of hours and his staff didn't know where he was. We're safer as a nation when his finger's not near the nuclear button. But I think I'm talking about it from a broader perspective of the lack of professionalism, maturity, and ethics in this Trump administration. So I'm going to continue to ask. I'm hoping that a member of the media, I'm big fan of my friend Katie Fang, maybe we should be doing a public records request, Legal AF, to ask on a Freedom of Information Act request, who was in charge? What was the communication between Trump and his staff, and who was in the situation room? And people have disappeared. Clinton, they had to do something to make sure he flew in safe to a location. They whisked George W. Bush during 9/11 into a undisclosed location, but his staff knew where he was. He was still in control, right? Didn't go to Dick Cheney as vice president. I don't know any of that, and I shouldn't know it. I should know it at this point. We know that bad people are out to get Donald Trump, and it's one thing to kind of do a little, obfuscation play, a little Statue of Liberty play, and have Donald Trump post on social media, well, I'll be taking the old Air Force One now, and the new one, I'm going to let the troops take a look at it in the UK. It's a beautiful plane, and then none of that happened. And even his own staff didn't know it didn't happen. So that's the big question. 25th Amendment triggered by Donald Trump's actions. And we need to get to the bottom of it. The senators need to get to the bottom of it. As I bring them onto my show, I'm going to ask them what they're doing about it and the letters that they're writing about it. And as soon as the Democrats get back into power in the House and hopefully the Senate, they need to take these types of issues up. It matters. And those that were involved in this, hiding Donald Trump while imperiling the lives of his staff and the press, it's another article of impeachment. isn't it? Within the government itself, there are people who are brave and are standing up to this rogue, lawless presidency, now headed by the most corrupt attorney general in the history of the Department of Justice, Todd Blanche. There's no other way to put it. And it is telling that the very first act that Todd Blanche did, as just before he was attorney general, was to choose who was going to swear him in. And who did he choose? Another corrupt former member of the Department of Justice, now a Third Circuit Court of Appeals judge named Emil Bovee, who used to be his law partner, who followed him like a puppy dog from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York into private practice, a two-man shop representing one client named Donald Trump, who rented space in 40 Wall Street, one of Donald Trump's buildings. And they represented together Donald Trump in every one of the criminal cases, some of the sex abuse cases, the fraud cases, the cases up to the United States Supreme Court. And the reward for Todd Blanche was a deputy attorney general and now attorney general. The reward for Emil Bovee, for not only that, they got him into the Department of Justice for about 3 or 4 months, 5 months. He was the acting attorney general until Pam Bondi got in. He's the one responsible for, as we know, telling federal judges to go F themselves. Those are the whistleblower's words and Erez Ruveni, not mine. And rather than tell federal judges trying to provide oversight over the migration and deportation policies, removal policies of Donald Trump that kicked off his administration, those middle of the night flights with children and other human beings on it to faraway places in third countries like El Salvador to be tortured without due process. Remember that? Who was behind that? Of course, Emil Bovee. And they kicked him upstairs to try to protect him from impeachment into the future. Having had the balls and the lack of ethics to tell federal judges to go F themselves in pound sand when they were trying to provide oversight. He's now in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. He's never been a judge in his life. They put him there. They kicked him upstairs to try to protect him. And Todd Blanche said, here's a good symbol of what my administration means to the world. I lied to get the job. I lied in the confirmation hearing. I lied to federal judges. And I'm going to signal that I'm never going to give up. I'm always going to be the Trump enabler. I'm always going to be his personal private lawyer. And the guy swearing me in, Emil Bovee, right, he's another one of the guys that was Donald Trump's personal lawyer, who's unethical, who should never have gotten confirmed, who's going to swear me in. That was his first act to stick his finger in the eye of America and tell us to go F ourselves. So if you think Todd Blanche came out of that process of confirmation, squeaking by one vote, having to sell he doesn't have a soul, so I would say sell his soul to get the confirmation votes. If you think that left him a chastened man, it didn't. It didn't. It probably emboldened him that he survived it. So I want to talk about the IRS audit officers, agents. These are people who are career IRS agents and auditors. That's all they do. It's a complicated job. And they have a statutory obligation to audit every president's tax returns get audited by law. By law. 4 years of Trump the first time around, first 2 years of this administration, vice president too. That's the law. And Todd Blanche, to get the job of attorney general, wrote a 1-paragraph hall pass to Donald Trump and his family and 400 companies that make up his trust about their prior, let's call it what it is, tax evasion. Tax evasion. And gave him a free pass on it. We already know from reporting in ProPublica and the New York Times that Donald Trump already owes over $100 million based on an audit done about his phony write-off of $75 million to cover $75 million worth of tax payments when he was making big money on The Celebrity Apprentice. And with interest, it's over $100 million. Wiped away unless a federal judge has something to say about it. at the stroke of a pen by Todd Blanche. And several days later, he got the nod to be the Attorney General. Transaction, anybody? Quid pro quo, anybody? And now the auditors who are in the midst of audits, acknowledging that there's already audits against Donald Trump and his family, Don Jr. and others already admitted it, have now joined the lawsuit brought by Democracy Forward in front of Judge Brinkema. She's the only judge so far to have this issue squarely in front of her. And the issue is, can Todd Blanche, does he have the power or the authority, or is it illegal and a crime for him to have given an immunity release to Donald Trump, Donald Trump's family, and all of his companies from prior tax audit and tax evasion liability? Yes or no, black or white? And we got the right judge in Judge Brinkema in the Eastern District of Virginia, the Rocket Docket. Judge Brinkema already blocked that aspect of the settlement Todd Blanche entered into that has been declared bad faith and illegal by Judge Williams in Miami. She's already blocked the Jan 6 fund, although who really cares? As I've said from the very beginning, the Jan 6 fund is not the way the Department of Justice is going to pay Jan 6ers. They're going to pay them through the back door, through budgeted items, budget money that was given to them by the House and the Senate while MAGA is still in charge. That's why Donald Trump's former high school military academy roommate Peter Ticketin is representing dozens and dozens and dozens of Jan 6ers, including some of the worst ones who were indicted or convicted for seditious conspiracy like the Proud Boys, and suing us for hundreds of millions of dollars with a complaint that would make your eyes pop out. I have it up on Legal AF Substack for you. I mean, you think Sidney Powell was mad as a hatter in her description of a conspiracy of globalists and Chinese and others to try to overthrow the election? Forget it. Wait till you read the new lawsuits being filed on behalf of the Jan 6ers. Wow. All those Federal Tort Claim Act cases, by the way, should be blocked and denied by federal judges. But it's not going to get that far because the Department of Justice is going to step in and settle the cases and pay the money out the back door. That's what's going to happen unless Congress is in the control of the Democrats and they block that from happening, which they have the power to do. How about a law that blocks all payments to Jan 6ers? Period. Done. The Congress has the power to do it. You have the power to send the right Congress back to Washington to do exactly that. Because without it, the Jan 6ers are going to get paid. 600 of them are being represented by a guy named Mark McCluskey. Mark McCluskey is the guy with his wife who was out with his AR-15. He's a lawyer. AR-15 during Black Lives Matter in St. Louis, Missouri. And lost his bar license, he lost his guns and all that, eventually got them all back. That's his cottage industry. He's representing all the Jan 6ers along with Peter Ticketin. You know, this is a MAGA lawyer employment statute, but that's what's going to happen. It's going to be these federal judges aren't going to know what hit them because they're never going to see the settlement agreements. They're never going to see the payments. We're going to have to use Freedom of Information Act requests in order to get them. So that's the fund. But the release, the immunity, whatever you want to call it, on May 19th, the one paragraph by Todd Blanche, that's now squarely before Judge Brinkema. I like Judge Brinkema for this. She famously said about a month ago at the start of a hearing about the fund to the solo one lawyer for the Department of Justice who showed up. She said, "You're a very brave man." And now the National Treasury Employees Union, the NTEU, made up of auditors, have joined the fight. And in the amended complaint, which is before Judge Brinkema, they say, we're between a rock and a hard place. We're between a Blanche and a violation of law place. We have a law in the books that Congress has passed that tells us what our audit responsibilities are. And we got a Department of Justice head who's not even in our department, right? We're in the Treasury Department, telling us not to audit and to stop the audits that are already ongoing. That can't be right. There's actually a federal criminal law coming out of the Nixon era of criminality that says that the president cannot direct who is audited and who's not audited, including himself. Coming out of the Nixon era, because Nixon was abusing the IRS and forcing the IRS to audit his political enemies and critics. Well, here it's just another version of it. Trump not wanting to pay his taxes. What did he say? Suckers only pay their taxes? The fact that he pays nothing in taxes indicates how smart he is? No. So I'm hoping Judge Brinkema, with this set of new filings, is going to bring this to a screeching halt. And then, you know what? Bring it. Bring it to the United States Supreme Court. I want to see even this MAGA 6 led by John Roberts have the temerity or the balls to look the American people in the eye and tell them that Donald Trump can pass a rule that exonerates him and absolves him from tax liability as a private citizen. I want to see even them say that. I don't see it. I mean, how is that not a violation of the domestic emoluments clause? The domestic emoluments clause that says that the president can't accept any gift, any tribute, any bounty, any payment, anything of value other than his paycheck. And that on the domestic side, any domestic entity, like the IRS, can't give him that gift, I guess, is the point. We know Donald Trump likes gifts. Did you hear the one about the Belgian diamond industry based in Antwerp that thought there was a good way to bribe Donald Trump? Give him a 321 diamond, 18 carat ring. And suddenly the tariffs against the diamond industry coming out of Antwerp disappeared. That's all you got to do is stroke Donald Trump, is give him a gift, make him a promise, and he'll make your indictment disappear. I'll talk about that in the next half. Make your tariff disappear, right? Give him a gaudy, this ring is so gaudy and bawdy that even, I don't think Super Bowl players would want to wear it on their ring, on their finger. That's all it took. Of course, the Senate Democrats are looking into this issue as to how is that possible? Why is that not a federal bribe? When we come back from our first break, I want to pick up with the BBC case, Donald Trump, something I think has backfired on him. The dismissal of a indictment, a very important indictment for securities fraud totaling $4 billion that Donald Trump, because he's friends with the Indian businessman, decided to force his Department of Justice to drop. But a federal judge stands in the way. We'll talk about that, and I'll touch on birthright citizenship and what's going on in that arena here on the Intersection Podcast. So many different ways to support what we do. The first one is download the audio. You watch us, we get a few 100,000 views, but the audio still drives the popularity, the ratings of podcasts these days. So come on, even if you're not a person who listens to audio, help us out. Hit the audio download button for the Intersection. That's one. Then, as you probably know, I do full-time my work in two places. One, Legal AF YouTube channel, which I co-founded, I curate. I do the first 4 videos every day. That's sort of my baby. And we're about to hit 1.2 million subscribers. Right now, check to see if you're subscribed on YouTube to Legal AF. If you're not, it may surprise you. Take a moment and just hit it. It's free. It literally doesn't cost you a thing, but means the world to us. As a personal favor to me, the traveling me, hit the subscribe button today and help us cross over that threshold. Then we've got the Legal AF Substack. What a fantastic community. We've only been doing it about a year. We're already in the top 10 and rising of all U.S. news. Substacks, 8 to 10 new pieces of content every day. A legal roundup live from me and others, all on Legal AF Substack. And we could use some help there as well. Take a minute and become a subscriber there as well. And then I want to, one last thing about something that I formed, as most people know, about a year ago-ish, I formed a law firm dedicated to the Midas Touch legal AF and intersection communities. It's called the Popok Firm. It's easy to find. We have a QR code up there on the screen, www.thepopokfirm.com or 1-877-POPOK AF. If you've been injured in an accident or somebody in your family has, God forbid, there's been a death as a result of the negligence of others, not your fault, of course. Turn your life upside down. We have lawyers. I've picked them, handpicked them around the country, all 50 states, billions of dollars of recovery. We're already representing several hundred Midas Touch and Legal AF members. We'll evaluate the case for you for free. We'll take the case. If we decide to take the case, you don't pay us a dime unless we recover. And so that's the Popok Firm. Take a minute and check out our new website. New website, same tireless fighters. And then, of course, we've got our intersection sponsors, and now here's a break for them. If you're 64 or older, you need to understand this. Medicare is so complicated that many people never actually see all of their options. You spend decades paying into the healthcare system. Then suddenly at 65, you're expected to sort through thousands of plans, endless fine print, changing drug coverage, provider networks, all while being flooded with ads and sales pitches. That's why I like Chapter. Chapter is the only Medicare advisor that compares every plan nationwide. My friends over at Midas, they've worked with them for years, and the feedback I got has been stellar. They walk through your doctors, prescriptions, and priorities to help you understand what coverage actually fits your life. And if your current plan is already the best fit, they'll tell you that too. No pressure, no gimmicks, just real guidance in a system that most people find overwhelming. If you're turning 65 or already on Medicare, give Chapter a call. The call is free, and they can review your options in under 20 minutes. I've made a lot of upgrades to improve my health and energy over the years, but one of the best investments has been my Lisa Legend mattress. At the end of a busy day, I know I'm going to get the kind of sleep that helps me wake up refreshed and ready to go. It's supportive without feeling, stiff, incredibly comfortable, and it's genuinely made a difference in how I feel every morning. Lisa has a lineup of beautifully crafted mattresses tailored to how you sleep. And if you're not sure which one is right for you, just take the Lisa Sleep Quiz, and you'll find your perfect match in 2 minutes or less. Go to lisa.com for 25% off select mattresses, plus get an extra $50 off with promo code TRUTH, exclusive for my listeners. That's LEESA.com. Promo code TRUTH for 25% off select mattresses, plus an extra $50 off. And when you use our code, you're supporting our show. Welcome back to The Intersection. I'm Michael Popok. You're on the Midas Touch Network. Let's get to our next topic. Let's talk about the BBC. Donald Trump sues the BBC for $10 billion, claims originally in his first lawsuit that his companies took a hit. The brand, the assets, the value of them, the ones that he was always hyperinflating or deflating that got him into trouble in New York for persistent fraud. Those same assets, he claims, took a hit because of a BBC documentary on a little-known channel that nobody watched in the United States about his Jan 6th ellipse speech was edited in a way that he said made him look bad. I don't know how you edit the Jan 6th speech and what happened in the aftermath of it to make him look good, but, who am I to quibble about a defamation lawsuit worth $10 billion? The problem is that by opening the door and claiming $10 billion worth of damage, you sort of have to turn over all your financial documents to show that you have that type of loss. See, there's no way for a defendant like the BBC to defend themselves if they don't see your finances. Well, Donald Trump didn't like that. So he ran back to court and said, wait, I don't want to open up all my finances and my tax returns. I've spent a lifetime hiding those things. I'm going to amend my lawsuit. And he thought by amending it and reducing it down to the only damage he claims now is his reputational damage. But I would argue he has no reputation to be damaged. Certainly not when it comes to Jan 6th. I mean, after the Jan 6 committee report, 800 pages, 8 days of hearings, Jack Smith's volume 1 report, his indictment. I mean, we know it like the back of our hands what Donald Trump did to lead that insurrection and to stop the transition of power. So I don't think he has a reputation, although he's putting it at stake here. I don't think he's got a reputation to be defamed. Even if he does, how is he ever going to prove $10 billion worth of reputational diminution or loss in this case? And even the judge, and as I know the top line media, the frontline media are reporting, well, Judge Altman in Miami, he's granted the motion to amend the complaint. Right. But he didn't say that Trump is going to be able to hide all of his finances, because he noted, this is Judge Altman, in his new order, it came out in the last 24 hours, he noted that he's still seeking $10 billion worth of loss. So the judge says it is obvious that there's going to be a fair amount of financial information that Trump is going to be required to turn over, even based on a slightly amended complaint. I mean, the other side, the BBC, is saying the whole case should be dismissed. He'll never have $10 billion worth of reputational damage. That would mean that in this past year, when he made $2.2 billion while he was president of the United States, wow, that he would have to say that he would have made $12.2 billion if it wasn't for the documentary that I assure you, you did not see or watch or hear about. This is what the Judge Altman says in footnote 1 of his order. The BBC also writes the plaintiff's proposed amended complaint is futile because it cannot even secure him the goal he seeks, avoidance of financial discovery. We agree in part and disagree in part with this assertion. I don't know who the we is. This is one judge, Judge Altman. We agree that an amended complaint won't necessarily obviate the need for certain financial disclosures, especially since the amended complaint retains the plaintiff's original $10 billion damages demand. I mean, he's going to leave it to the magistrate judge, Judge Lett, to figure that all out. But I've tried defamation cases. I've tried multi-billion-dollar cases. Trump is never going to, I mean, he can get an expert to say anything. You know, we have a phrase for that in my line of work, but, you know, as long as you pay them. However, to show a $10 billion loss, the Donald Trump's reputation took a $10 billion hit because of this clip job of his speech. Impossible. So it's the beginning of the end as Donald Trump effectively withdraws his $10 billion claim against the BBC. I mean, it has not been a good week in that courthouse for him. And I practice in that courthouse, the Miami federal courthouse, which houses, among other judges, Judge Williams, who declared that Todd Blanche committed effectively fraud on the court, or at least bad faith, in the Jan 6 settlement fund. You've got Judge Gales, who blocked discovery in the case involving the Wall Street Journal and the Epstein birthday book submission by Donald Trump, or the allegations of it, or the reporting on it, because he's poised to dismiss the defamation case for several $1 billion brought by Trump against Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal. So he's blocked all depositions. No, there will not be a deposition of Rupert Murdoch anytime soon or at all. That's two. You got Capital One, which is being presided by the same Judge Altman, who just told the world that they suspected, and the reason they fired all those bank accounts that Donald Trump had, they suspected that he was a money launderer, potentially, and or was financing terrorism. And now you've got this case. It's a pretty busy day. It's a pretty busy week in one courthouse, especially a courthouse that Donald Trump picked himself. He's the plaintiff. He can file his lawsuit effectively wherever he wants in Florida. And to those who have asked me, why isn't he filing more things in front of Judge Cannon, who's also in the Southern District, who's a lot closer to West Palm Beach and Mar-a-Lago than Miami? Why not? You may not want to know the answer. I think it's a couple of reasons. I think one, they're trying to save her for something bigger. I think they try to save her for possibly U.S. attorney at one time, and now I think, or Attorney General. Now I think they're keeping their powder dry in case they want to appoint her to the United States Supreme Court, and they don't want a lot of Trump cases in front of her to screw up her record even more. She already did a number on it with the Mar-a-Lago case. That's my working theory. It's the only explanation as to why they keep driving down to Miami, using their Miami lawyer to file these lawsuits in a courthouse they keep losing in, for sure. So there's our BBC update. And now I want to turn to this thing that happened today, which is there's a wealthy Indian family named Adani. And they are billionaires. They're probably bigger than Trump in India. And they have a lot of different businesses, including in solar power and energy infrastructure. And they raised in America $4 billion from investors. And in raising it, they did not disclose that they were spending a couple of $100 million bribing officials, political officials in India and in other countries in order to get approvals for their projects. Probably something the investors would want to know, right? That this is a house of cards supported by bribery, or what we used to call in America before Donald Trump took over, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. See, Donald Trump got rid of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, shuttered the Department of Justice units that were responsible for policing it or going after it, and put all those prosecutors out to pasture, and closed the FBI division that dealt with foreign corrupt practices as well. Why? Because Donald Trump wanted to commit foreign corrupt practices in his international businesses, and he didn't want any tripwires screwing him up. I mean, isn't that obvious? What Department of Justice and what administration in its right mind eliminates the regulation of bribery and foreign corrupt practices? I mean, only one who's in that business, that line of work, right? So Adani gets indicted by a grand jury, 20 or 30 counts, along with some family members, for this bribery scheme. It's also securities fraud. It's a criminal fraud. And it's done by the once proud Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn, where between Brooklyn and Manhattan, those are the two jurisdictions that, for example, are responsible for financial crime because, New York is one of the financial capitals of the world. So they bring this indictment and they're going to trial. Okay. And the indictment happened in October of 2024, right before the election. You're looking at, dozens and dozens of years in jail if the guy gets convicted, and, billions of dollars of restitution. And what happens? Well, Donnie figures out that he's in the energy business and in India, and Donald Trump wants energy, nuclear power, and better Indian relationships. So on the day that Donald Trump gets elected, or a couple days later, Mr. Adani posts in his social media, a congratulatory social media post, and makes an offer. This is while he's under criminal indictment for securities fraud related to the energy industry and solar power. He offers Donald Trump on a golden platter that he'll make a $10 billion investment, create 15,000 new jobs in America. And what does Trump do? He has his son go visit him in India. And lo and behold, a little known Department of Justice lawyer, who is a guy named Trent McCotter, who is the principal associate deputy attorney general, the PDAG for short. Pretty big job. I don't know if it's the number 6 job or number 7 job in the Department of Justice. It's pretty big. And that job usually has the U.S. attorneys in each district, 93 districts, report to the PDAG. I think he splits the job with Akash Singh, another guy that's out there. Anyway, Trent McCotter doesn't know a darn thing about securities fraud and securities laws. Never heard of the case, didn't know what the matter was about. You know what he was doing before he became the PDAG or the PADAG? He was he worked for a clinic related to the separation of church and state at a little known I think Catholic University's law school. That's what he did. And then he's got like the number 7 job in the Department of Justice. So purposely, you can tell, Todd Blanche sends this guy, who's useless, who's a 90-pound weakling when it comes to legal, up against the new lawyer hired by Mr. Adani. And guess who that is? I'll leave you a moment in comments. Guess who they hire to represent them against the Department of Justice? Right. Donald Trump's personal lawyer. Right. Donald Trump's personal lawyer, a guy named Robert Giaffra, who runs a firm that I know well called Sullivan and Cromwell in New York, who's now taken over and represents Donald Trump in all of his criminal matters, all of his criminal appeals, all of his attempts to claw back money from sex abuse survivors like E. Jean Carroll. You can blame Sullivan and Cromwell. Robert Giaffra also has another Hall of Shame moment when he led to slaughter, I think willingly, all of the major New York-based law firms, international law firms, to pay a tribute, an extortive tribute to Donald Trump, and give him $1 billion worth of free legal service and mothball their pro bono departments that were devoted to justice and free legal service. And that was led by Robert Giaffra. So if you want to hire somebody who's got the juice with Donald Trump and his Department of Justice, of course you hire Robert Giaffra. And that's what Adani did. And so all of this story I'm telling you is outlined in a 60-page order that came out today by Judge Garofis in the Eastern District of New York, in which the Department of Justice, led by a guy you never heard of, Trent McCotter, filed a motion to dismiss the indictment, throwing out the door and into the trash can tens of thousands of hours of investigative work by the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Justice, prosecutors in the Eastern District of New York's office to bring that indictment and prepare for trial. And he tossed it away, as the judge noted, without even consulting with the Department of Justice, the SEC, the Eastern District of New York, the FBI, nobody. He made the decision based on his own merits. Now, what happened is, he got, Todd Blanche set him up. I don't know how to put this any better. Todd Blanche sent in a neophyte, wet behind the ears, green as a new tree, to go up against Robert Giaffra and Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the big major firms, loaded for bear, very, very competent. I've beaten them, not to brag, but I've beaten Sullivan and Cromwell back in the day. But, it's not for the faint of heart. And it's not for a guy like Trent McCotter, who used to work in the church and state clinic at his local law school. And no surprise, Sullivan and Cromwell did a full court press. The guy was outmatched. It was asymmetrical. You had 4 PowerPoints of 100 pages apiece. You had hundreds of pages of submission. You had expert testimony and reports. Of course, McCotter succumbed and folded and decided to dismiss that indictment. And then there's the issue of the $10 billion waved around that Donald Trump wanted to shore up his economy. And the judge said to McCotter effectively, and I've got the order up on Legal AF Substack for paid members to look at, basically said this was very unusual, highly unusual, very disrespectful, the way McCotter has treated this court as a co-equal branch of government. His failure to provide this court, this is my paraphrase, with any evidence, any sworn testimony, any document to support any of the arguments made by him to dismiss the indictment. In fact, the judge says, I'm not dismissing the entire indictment. Now that's going to get the Trump side, Department of Justice, up in arms. Oh, another activist judge. But he's got a role to play in the dismissal of an indictment. And it's not good enough for him. He told him what he needed in order to dismiss the indictment, and McCotter refused to provide it. And the judge said, I don't like to be insulted. So if you want to try again and come back to me with evidence, I'll dismiss the entirety of the indictment. And right now, it's not all being dismissed. Now, they can go try to take an appeal to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals if they don't like it, or up to the United States Supreme Court. But the judge here, Judge Garofis, has done the right thing. This is the second judge in a week who's used the opportunity to write a opinion to speak to history, to speak to the public. In fact, Judge Garofis ended his order this way. The other judge, by the way, Judge Amit Mehta, begrudgingly dismissing the Proud Boys' indictment for seditious conspiracy and other crimes, but using the opportunity to speak to America and speak to the public just in time for a midterm that's less than 90 days away. Here's how Judge Garofis put it in his order. Conclusion. As noted throughout this opinion, the irregularities in the decision to dismiss the indictment are concerning. On the current record, McCotter appears to have eschewed the professional opinions of innumerable officials from various federal offices and replaced them with his judgment. The fact that McCotter came to this decision largely in collaboration with defense counsel, that would be the Sullivan and Cromwell Trump firm, and seemingly without input from the FBI and SEC agents who investigated the alleged misconduct or the attorneys from the department, the SEC, the U.S. Attorney's Office who brought the case, is highly unusual. And McCotter's refusal to meet the procedural requirements of Rule 48A about dismissal, even after the court's clear direction to do so, evinces a lack of respect for the judiciary as a co-equal branch. And the judge ends it this way. The department's cases brought against individual defendants are subject to their own guidelines. It is up to the public to decide what effect offers of the kind that have been made here, the $10 billion offer, on the equal administration of justice and the rule of law. Ultimately, it is the public's judgment and not this court's that truly matters. Isn't that what we've been talking about on The Intersection, on Legal AF all along? It's the public's judgment that matters. We have the final say, that we are powerful together, joined together, both at time of voting and here in union, in our fellowship that's developed on Midas Touch and on Legal AF and on the Intersection podcast. I appreciate all that you do. It's the reason that in the middle of the night for me, I'm doing the Intersection podcast and I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, my family is lovely and has given me permission to do the videos on a normal cadence that I do and the reporting that I do for Legal AF and the Midas Touch Network. Absolutely. And I love every inch of them. And my beautiful wife, my 2-year-old daughter, literally could not do it without them. But what motivates me just as much is to be here in fellowship with you. So many different ways for you to help us and continue to build our audience. Hit the free subscribe button over on Legal AF YouTube. That's one. Then we've got Legal AF Substack. That's a place where you may not yet have dabbled, but if you do, I think it will be rewarding. Become a Legal AF Substack member as well. Keep us in the top 10 of U.S. news Substacks. So we got those two things to do. Then I've got the Popok firm, which we formed to represent specifically Midas Touch and Legal AF audience members. We're already representing several hundred of them in cases that matter, that have turned people's lives upside down, where the negligence of others, through no fault of your own, you or somebody you love has been injured, or, God forbid, has died as a result. Could be medical malpractice, auto accident, trucking accident, Uber accident, some sort of employment law issue, civil rights issue, you name it. We'll evaluate the case for you. I've got amazing lawyers, trial lawyers like me in all 50 states working together for you. Brand new website, same tireless fighters. Hit the QR code or go to 1-877 Popok AF, 1-877 Popok AF, or www.thepopokfirm.com. And then, of course, we got our tremendous sponsors here on the Intersection and the Midas Touch Network. So until my next report, this is Michael Popok. Shout out to the Midas Mighty, the Legal AFers, and the Intersectionists. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.